After the end of World War I, while the rest of the world was slowly trying to return to peace, there was a small village in the American state of Mississippi where innocent people were being brutally murdered every single night. Every evening, as soon as the sun went down and darkness fell, the villagers didn't dare step outside their homes. That's because once darkness fell, the village would be haunted by some terrifying, inhuman creatures. And from the horrifying tale of that village comes today's film, Sinners. Released in 2025, the movie has an IMDb rating of 7.9. The story opens with a narration explaining that music is the one thing in the world that possesses immense healing powers. Good music can make anyone forget their sorrows and even heal their illnesses. According to legend, there are some musicians across the world whose voices hold supernatural power. They can sing such beautiful and enchanting songs that their music creates a strange connection between life and death, the past and the future. Listening to their magical, powerful melodies, anyone can forget their pain and be filled with joy. But it's not just humans. Spirits, ghosts, and malevolent entities are also irresistibly drawn to this kind of music. Across the world, these powerful musicians are known by different names: Philly, fire creepers, griots, and others. And just after this narration ends, the real story of the movie begins. The date is October 16, 1932. The place a small village in Mississippi. There we see a boy named Sammy. He enters the village church, visibly injured and trembling in fear, clutching a broken guitar. Seeing him in this state, the people in the church are horrified. It's clear something terrible happened to Sammy the night before. The village priest quickly brings him close and tells him to start praying. Terrified, Sammy obeys and begins chanting God's name. From this moment, the film flashes back to show us what happened the day before. Sammy lived in the village with his entire family and worked in a cotton field. During his free time, he would play guitar and sing. He had a natural gift. Since childhood, he had been able to sing with an unusually beautiful and haunting voice that everyone loved. His dream was to one day go to the city and become a famous musician. But Sammy's father didn't approve. His father was the pastor of the village church and wanted Sammy to give up music and devote his life to God, becoming a pastor just like him. But Sammy didn't pay much attention to his father's wishes. He had no intention of giving up music. One day, after finishing work, Sammy met with his two cousins, twin brothers named Stack and Smoke. They had fought in World War I on behalf of their country. After the war, they made a lot of money in the city and returned to the village. Now, the two brothers wanted to open a juke joint in the village, essentially a nightclub where the local black community could come to dance, sing, drink, and unwind after a hard day's work. To do that, the brothers bought land and an old factory from a white man in the village named Hogwood, paying him a large sum. It was clear Hogwood was racist. He despised black people, and even spat repeatedly while talking to the brothers as a sign of disrespect. After acquiring the land, the brothers began looking for people to help run their nightclub. First, they approached their cousin Sammy. Since he was an incredibly talented singer, they wanted him to perform at the club every night. Then they recruited a pianist named Delta Slim and a young woman named Parlene to sing as well. For security, they hired a man named Cornbread to work as the bouncer. And to serve drinks and food, they brought on two more people, Grace and Bo, as bartenders. While searching the village for workers, Stack ran into a woman named Mary. Years ago, Stack and Mary had been in love, but one day, without saying a word, Stack suddenly left her. Since then, Mary had been waiting for him to return. Now, seeing him again after so many years, she was furious. Mary said, "I waited all these years for you, but you never came to see me, not even once. My mother just died yesterday, and you didn't even come to her funeral. How could you be so heartless?" With that, she stormed off in anger. Meanwhile, after finishing his work, Smoke went to visit his wife Annie. Although they were married, they had been living apart for many years. A few months ago, their young daughter had died, and the grief had driven Smoke to leave Annie and move far away. But now, after returning to the village, it seemed like the old love between them was beginning to rekindle. Smoke even invited Annie to come visit their new nightclub. Meanwhile, on the other side of the village, we see a man named Remick. His entire body appears to be burned, with smoke rising from his skin. Severely injured and limping, he stumbles toward a house on the outskirts of the village to seek help. This house belongs to a couple named Joan and Bart. At first, when they see Remick, they're terrified and point a gun at him. Sensing this, Remick begins to lie. He says, "A group of men attacked my house. They killed my wife and daughter. I barely escaped with my life. Please let me hide inside your home, or else those men will find me and kill me too." Saying this, he breaks down crying. Hearing his story, Bart and Joan feel pity and allow him to hide inside their home. Not long after, a group of hunters arrive outside the house in a car and on horseback. One of them tells Joan, "We're looking for a man. He may look ordinary, but he's extremely dangerous. He can do terrible things. Have you seen any stranger around here?" Joan replies, "No, we haven't seen anyone like that." The hunter warns her, "If you let that man into your home, you'll be putting yourselves in grave danger. Tell us the truth while there's still time." But Joan insists that she hasn't seen any stranger. As all this is happening, the sun begins to set and darkness starts to fall. Seeing this, another hunter says from outside, "We need to leave before it gets completely dark. Staying here any longer won't be safe." And with that, the hunters ride off just before nightfall. Seeing them leave, Joan feels relieved and returns to her home. But once inside, she is horrified to find her husband Bart lying dead on the floor, covered in blood. Sitting right next to him is Remick, his face and body soaked in blood. He now looks like a terrifying monster. His nails and teeth have grown long and razor sharp, and his eyes have turned a ghostly white. Remick was in fact a vampire. For those unfamiliar with the term, a vampire is a kind of undead being. Just as we believe in ghosts and spirits, vampires are also part of that supernatural realm. Typically, when a person dies, their soul leaves their body and finds peace. But vampires are the kind of dead beings whose souls remain trapped within their own corpses. Vampires possess several supernatural powers. Since one must die in order to become a vampire, they are essentially immortal, capable of living for hundreds or even thousands of years. They cannot be killed easily. Special methods are required to destroy them. They survive by drinking human blood. And once they suck a person's blood and kill them, that dead person too transforms into a vampire within a short time. However, vampires do have weaknesses. For example, exposure to sunlight causes their skin to burn. That's why they only come out at night. Earlier, when Remick arrived at Bart and Joan's house, the sunlight had already started burning his skin, which is why smoke was rising from his body. Now, with a devilish grin, Remick tells Joan, "Don't be afraid. Everything will be just fine, very soon." And just as he says that, Bart, who was lying dead a moment ago, suddenly gets up. He too had now turned into a vampire. Seeing all of this, Joan becomes absolutely terrified and starts screaming loudly. Meanwhile, the very next day, Stack and Smoke hold a grand opening of their nightclub with great pomp and celebration. On the first day itself, many people from the village gather there. Everyone is drinking, eating, dancing, singing, and having a great time. It's as if every single villager finally gets to let loose and enjoy themselves freely. Because of the large crowd, all the staff were extremely busy managing everything. Among the guests was Stack's ex-girlfriend, Mary. As the party goes on for a while, at one point Sammy begins to sing. Her singing is so beautiful and powerful that it almost feels like a bridge is being formed between the past and the future. It appears that spirits from both time periods begin to gather inside the nightclub, all enjoying Sammy's song. This is exactly what we were told would happen at the beginning of the movie. Meanwhile, hearing Sammy's song from afar, Remick, Bart, and Joan become drawn to it and approach the nightclub. The three of them ask for permission to enter from the doorman, Conrad. But there's a problem. All three of them are white, while the nightclub was built specifically for black people only. So, they're not allowed inside. They try to explain that they were just passing through from a nearby town, and when they heard the music from outside, they really liked it and wanted to come in, dance, eat, and have a good time. But Smoke, Stack, and the others firmly refuse and turn them away. However, the three of them don't go far. They sit down by the roadside just outside the club and start singing among themselves. Sometime later, Mary leaves the nightclub alone, heading home. On the way, she sees Remick, Bart, and Joan sitting by the road singing. Quietly, she sits down beside them and listens. When their song ends, Mary says, "You all sing beautifully. Do you really want to come to our nightclub?" Remick replies, "We just want to have a good time, that's all. And we're even willing to spend a lot of money to enjoy ourselves in your club." Saying this, he hands Mary several gold coins. But while he's speaking, saliva begins to drip heavily from Remick's mouth. Then he starts moving toward Mary in a strange and unsettling way. Alarmed, Mary quickly pulls out the gun she was carrying and points it at them. Frightened, she tells them all to leave immediately and turns back to return to the nightclub. But just then, Remick suddenly leaps toward her from behind. A few moments later, we see that Mary has returned safely to the nightclub. She goes straight to Conrad to ask for permission to re-enter. Once allowed in, she goes back to enjoying the party. After some time, she calls Stack into a side room under the pretense of becoming intimate, but instead, she bites into his neck and begins sucking his blood. Hearing Stack's screams, Smoke, Annie, and the others rush in. They find Stack lying on the floor, his body covered in blood and completely lifeless. Beside him stands Mary, her mouth and body smeared with his blood. Realizing what happened, Smoke immediately understands that Mary has killed his brother. Furious, he fires 5 or 6 bullets at Mary in a row. But even after being shot that many times, Mary is completely unharmed. She stands back up, grins, and bolts out of the nightclub. As she's running away, she screams, "We will kill every last one of you, one by one." Everyone, Smoke, Annie, Sammy, is now utterly terrified. A check confirms that Stack is completely dead, and Smoke is emotionally shattered seeing his brother's body. He had loved him deeply. The party is called off, and everyone is told to leave the nightclub. Then Annie tells Smoke and the others that Mary had died long ago and become a vampire. That's why the bullets didn't affect her. And since she bit Stack and drank his blood to death, he who would become a vampire in a short while. So now, they must quickly remove Stack's body from the house, or else all of them would be in grave danger. Hearing this, Smoke becomes furious and says, "Stack is my brother. No one is throwing him out. He stays here, in this room." Witnessing everything that was happening, a girl named Grace, who was there at the nightclub, became very frightened. She wanted to quickly return home because their young daughter was alone at home. So, Grace's husband went outside to bring their car around so they could leave. At that time, the nightclub's doorman and security guard, Cornbread, had gone outside to use the bathroom. Taking advantage of that moment, Remick and his people bit him too and turned him into a vampire. A little while later, Cornbread returned and asked for permission to enter the nightclub, which immediately made Annie suspicious. She asked, "Why do you need permission to come in? You usually walk in whenever you want." The truth was, vampires can't enter someone's home or private property without being invited. Since Cornbread was now a vampire, he could no longer enter the club on his own. But Cornbread kept denying everything and said, "It's fine if you won't let me in. I don't care, but at least pay me for the work I did today." Saying that, he asked Smoke for his wages. As soon as Smoke reached his hand outside the doorway to give Cornbread the money, Cornbread grabbed it and tried to pull him outside to attack him. But Smoke had already sensed something was off. Quickly, he pulled out his gun and shot Cornbread in the face, injuring him. Then Smoke rushed back inside the nightclub and slammed the door shut. Everyone inside was deeply afraid. They couldn't believe what was happening. In the midst of all this, they suddenly heard Stack's voice coming from a locked room. Earlier, after Stack had died, they had locked his body in one of the rooms. Now, from inside that room, Stack was saying that he had been sick earlier, but now he felt perfectly fine and wanted them to open the door and let him out. Hearing that made everyone even more terrified. Nobody wanted to open the door or let him out. After some time, Stack broke the door down himself and came out. But before he could attack anyone, Annie splashed him with a jar of garlic water. Stack's body immediately began to burn and blister, forcing him to run away screaming. Then Annie explained that vampires have several weaknesses. They cannot tolerate sunlight, garlic, or silver. Contact with any of these causes their skin to burn and peel off, and they can't be killed with guns, bombs, or knives. The only way to truly kill a vampire is to drive a wooden stake through its heart. She said, "From now on, we'll have to destroy every vampire, one by one, this way." So everyone began preparing to fight back. First, they peeled a large amount of garlic and stored it in glass jars. Then each of them armed themselves with a sharp wooden stake. In the middle of all this, they noticed someone had collapsed inside the nightclub. The floor near him was soaked. Everyone thought a vampire had attacked and killed him. To prevent him from transforming into a vampire, they quickly dragged his body out of the nightclub. They started suspecting that one of them had already turned into a vampire and had secretly attacked that man. To find out the truth, Annie suggested that everyone eat a raw garlic clove, since vampires can't tolerate garlic. At first, some people resisted, but eventually, everyone was forced to eat it. Once they all did, it became clear that none of them had turned. They were all fine. That's when they realized the collapsed man hadn't died at all. He had simply passed out from drinking too much alcohol, and the bottle in his hand had broken, soaking the floor around him, which they had mistakenly thought was blood. Meanwhile, that man, now regaining consciousness outside, began screaming for help. But before anyone could react, Cornbread suddenly appeared and attacked him, and killed him. Meanwhile, it was revealed that after the party ended, the people who had been asked to leave the nightclub were now all turned into vampires by Remick and his followers. Those vampires were now roaming around the nightclub, laughing, dancing, and singing. The only people still safe were the few who had stayed inside the club. At that moment, Grace's husband returned with the car and called out to her, saying, "I've brought the car. Come quickly. We have to go home right now." But everyone had already realized that her husband had become a vampire, so no one said anything to him. Just then, Remick arrived and told everyone, "If you want to live, let us all into the club. We'll set you free. You'll become immortal like us. But if you refuse, we'll go straight to Grace's house, where her little daughter is all alone right now." Hearing this, Grace became terrified and deeply anxious. Remick continued, "Everyone I've turned into a vampire, I can see their memories. Through their thoughts, I've learned a lot about you and your friends." Then he began revealing personal things about Grace, things he had learned from her husband's memories. Hearing them, Grace broke down in tears. Then Remick said, "All right, here's the deal. Just give us Sammy. There's something magical about his music. Just like I was drawn here by his voice, the other vampires will be drawn to him too. I want to use his music to gather all the remaining vampires in one place. If you hand him over, we'll spare the rest of you." Soon after, Stack, Mary, and the rest of the vampires showed up too. They gave the group an ultimatum. Either let us into the club or give us Sammy. But Smoke and the others refused to accept either demand. So they slammed the club doors shut and barricaded themselves inside. A little while later, the vampires outside began singing. It was the very song Grace and her husband used to sing for their daughter. Hearing it, Grace was overwhelmed with emotion and fury. She shouted, "If you've hurt my daughter in any way, I'll kill every last one of you. If you're so powerful, come fight me." In that rage, Grace accidentally invited the vampires into the nightclub, which was all they needed to enter. As soon as she said it, the vampires came pouring inside. The people inside quickly prepared to defend themselves, and a fierce battle broke out. Armed with sharp wooden stakes, they managed to kill several vampires after a hard fight. But gradually, their group began to fall. Annie, Grace, Delta, Slim, and Parlin all died. At one point, Stack tried to bite Annie and turn her into a vampire. But Smoke, knowing what she had asked of him earlier, had no choice but stab her in the heart with a wooden stake and kill her. Annie had made him promise, "If I'm ever about to turn, kill me first. I don't want to become one of them." Smoke honored her last wish. But killing the woman he loved with his own hands devastated him. Seeing Annie die like that, Mary was overwhelmed with grief and fled. Eventually, nearly everyone was dead. Only Smoke and Sammy remained alive. Unable to face so many vampires, the two of them tried to escape through the back exit. But just then, Stack appeared and attacked Smoke. A brutal fight broke out between the two brothers. In the end, Smoke managed to kill Stack after a grueling battle. While they were fighting, Sammy tried to slip away, but Remick caught him. Remick began torturing him slowly, savoring the pain. All the other vampires gathered to watch. Remick clawed Sammy's face with his long nails, drawing blood. But before Remick could finish him off, Sammy grabbed his guitar and smashed it over Remick's head. Part of the guitar was made of silver, and it pierced Remick's skull. The silver caused him excruciating pain. Because Remick was the one who had turned all the other vampires, he was their source. So any injury to him hurt them all. As the silver burned inside Remick's head, the rest of the vampires began writhing in agony. Taking that opportunity, Smoke rushed in from behind and drove a wooden stake into Remick's chest. All around, the other vampires screamed in torment. At that very moment, dawn broke. Sunlight began pouring in. The vampires' bodies started to catch fire. Even Remick, the leader, was consumed by flames and burned to death. At last, all the vampires were dead, and their souls were finally set free. After everything that happened, Smoke tells Sammy to go back home. Sammy, badly injured, goes to the church and meets his father. When his father sees him, he throws away his guitar and tells him to stop playing music and start chanting the name of God instead. This is the same scene we saw at the very beginning of the story. Meanwhile, Smoke is seen sitting in front of their nightclub, deeply heartbroken and in despair. His mind drifts back to how, just a day ago, he and his brother and friends had worked so hard to build this nightclub, and now, in just one night, everything was gone. He had lost his brother, the woman he loved, and all his friends. As Smoke sits there in sorrow, Hogwood shows up with some of his men, sneaking in through the back entrance of the club. Hogwood's plan was to kill Smoke and his brother in the morning and take back all their money and the club for himself. He never wanted a black man to own or run this place. But before they could do anything, Smoke spotted them from a distance and opened fire. In the shootout, Hogwood was badly wounded and most of his men were killed. Eventually, Smoke managed to kill Hogwood and the rest of them, but he too was seriously injured in the fight. As he lay dying, he imagined his wife, Annie, and their late daughter waiting for him on the other side. Meanwhile, Sammy, ignoring his father's words, takes his broken guitar and walks out of the house in tears. Music had always been his passion, and he simply couldn't give it up. Then we see a time jump. 60 years later, in the year 1992, Sammy is now an old man, but still fulfills his passion by performing in a nightclub in Chicago. Life had turned out all right in his own way, but one night, out of nowhere, Stack and Mary come to visit him, looking exactly the same as they did 60 years ago. Sammy is terrified. Even though he had grown old, they hadn't aged a day. Shocked, Sammy asks, "How are you two still alive?" Stack replies, "My brother, Smoke, loved me too much. That night he couldn't bring himself to kill me. He made me promise that I'd never harm you and always stay far away from you. And because I gave him my word, I've never come near you all these years. But now that you're old and close to the end, I can offer you something. I can turn you into a vampire and make you immortal if you want." Sammy responds, "I've had everything I ever wanted in life. Now I want to embrace my death too and enjoy it in peace." Hearing this, Stack says, "All right, as you wish. But before I go, I'd like to hear you sing one last time." Sammy picks up his guitar and begins to play a song for them. After a while, as Stack and Mary prepare to leave, Sammy says, "You know, I've never been able to forget that terrible night. But before that night came, the time I spent with all of you, those were the best days of my life." Stack replies, "You're absolutely right. That was the last time I saw my brother, the last time I walked in the sunlight, and the last time I truly felt free. I really missed that day." And with those words, Stack and Mary leave. Sammy is left reminiscing about the past, filled with wonder, grief, and a deep sense of nostalgia. And that's where the story of this film ends. So, that's it for today's video. Let us know in the comments how you liked it. If you enjoyed it, give it a like. If not, feel free to dislike. We'll see you again in the next video.